few people just log in. So, okay. No sé. Buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenas tardes. Todavía hay luz. There's still some light. So, buenas tardes, sí. Espero que ustedes estén bien, ¿sí? ¿Todo está bien? ¿Está bien?
Sí, está bien.
Magnífico. Ok. Vamos a practicar con muchas cosas esta noche. Principalmente en el pasado. I do want you to take some chances on some pasado here. There is one of the 2 videos I gave you to watch that will do a little walkthrough just in case, because it was harder. The one with the 2 sisters talking.
Second part.
Did you notice that was harder?
Yeah, because they were, switching back and forth. Yeah, and there was one thing I didn't understand until the questions, and then I had to look some stuff up and go back.
Okay, a ver. So, yeah, we won't go through the whole thing because we won't go through that question and answer section. Sure. But as I was thinking, vale la pena. Yeah, it's probably worth it to walk through some of that. One thing you should notice, because the sister combo telling a story in the past thing, because they're from Colombia, a specific part of Colombia. Did you notice anything about the way they said you to each other?
No. No, not you.
You expect that people will use tú with family members, but in Colombia, it is very, very common in certain parts of Colombia, especially, for people to use usted with family. And that can happen. And I think, wow, what is that? But it is a very usual thing to hear people using usted, which to me sounds like super, super formal. I have lately even listened to some things where people, both from Spain and from Mexico, sort of reiterated that if you are under 30, at like 30 years old or younger, is becoming less and less common for people to use usted, both in Spain and in Mexico, for the 30 and under crowd, even if they don't know you. I mean, unless you're in a very formal business setting, it is just, if you perceive that somebody is in your age range and you're young people, they will automatically go into tú mode and not use usted. So, it's the whole thing of, when I hit the age where everybody called me ma'am. And that is not always the case with older people. Older people are 30 and over are more conscious of that distinction between usted and tú. But en Colombia es muy común usar usted con la familia. Es así. It is that way because they do have another weird you that is called vos in some parts of Colombia. And that kind of seeps into the equation as well. But anyway, okay. Vamos a practicar con el pasado. Sí, sí, sí.
In Colombia, do they use tú with friends?
They may use tú, they may use vos. And vos is a different you. There are jokes about how, you only use vos with somebody who's really, really close, like a really close friend. But somebody that you see every day, you may still, you may use tú with them, but not vos because they're not close enough. It's something you as a traveler don't have to worry about, to be honest with you, but you should be aware that in some parts of the Latin American world, they do have yet another word for you. And it is patchy. In parts of Colombia, they use vos. In other parts of Colombia, they do not use vos. So it can be very, very patchy regionally, even within a country. So, okay. Yeah. Just be aware that it's out there. And if you hear people use the word vos, you know they're saying you, but it's a friendly you. Okay. Vamos a practicar. I just want to show you the two screens you may want to pull up if you want to have reference handy. Reference handy is, is this little puppy here, right? Your imperfecto charts, And another reference you may want to have up is your preterito preterit charts. And the preterito is more problematic because there are a lot of irregulars that you at this stage will not necessarily know, and that's okay. But if you need to have those two things, if you had it as a printout handy, or if you pull it up on your screen, just be aware, probably want to have it around. Okay. Today, I would like people to tell some stories. Very short stories, right? I asked you to prep 3 or 4 sentences to share an idea about the past. And I sent you a list. I sent you an example, right? So we'll do that, but we'll do warm up first. And I want to, before we, well, as part of our warm up, actually, you can see my white screen, ¿verdad? Right?
See?
Okay, fantástico. Something I want you guys to notice, porque sí es importante. This is really kind of a big deal. When we are using imperfecto, or when you are listening to people using imperfecto, and remember, the best way that we would express the idea of imperfecto in English is if in English, what you mean is somebody was doing something, or a group of people were doing something. If that is the idea you want to convey, imperfecto is the one that you want to go to. If what you mean is the idea of used to do something, if that's the idea you want to convey, imperfecto is what you want to use. That is your go-to tense. All right. Because imperfecto is the world of description. It's the world of things that are kind of fuzzy with beginning and end. You know, somebody was doing something. You're just talking about what was going on in the background, right? Whereas that world of preterito is used a lot more to talk about actions with a clear beginning or a clear end. Okay. Things that are event oriented. Okay. If it moves the events of the story forward, it should be preterito, right? If I'm talking about, oh, wow, she was perfectly happy. Was happy is not an event. It's how you feel. So, was happy is probably going to be imperfecto. And do not let me leave this evening without us addressing the idea of gustar in the past. That is something I do want to work on to show you how it will definitely fall into one category or another. And it really won't be that hard for you to figure out. Okay. Bien. So, okay. With this idea of imperfecto that has one job in like painting the background information in, you are going to find that the forms of ser, all the things that fall into that category of era, eras, era, éramos, eran, they will be super, super common in imperfecto. So what I want to show you is that certain verbs, when you even want to talk about yourself, when you do your little spiel, certain verbs will pop up over and over and over again in imperfecto, but a lot less in preterito, a lot less. Estar will show up a lot in its imperfecto forms. Estaba, estabas, estaba, estábamos, estaban. It's going to show up a ton. Tener and its forms in imperfecto of tenía, tenías, tenía, teníamos, tenían is going to show up a ton in imperfecto and not as much in preterito. And this whole thing of haber, using haber, which is going to mean only one thing. It can only be había, and I can't put my accent mark with a capital, había. You're going to hear that a lot, but less so as hubo. Certain verbs in Spanish will lend themselves very much so to this idea of imperfecto. Okay, because when we say that somebody had something, it's not an event. That I had something in my backpack, in my purse, in my wallet. It just was there. There is no beginning and end. It was there is not an event. So it's going to have to be an imperfecto. Okay. Estar, whenever I talk about somebody was happy, somebody was surprised, somebody was tall, was short, was cute. Okay. These are all descriptions. They're going to be likely to be in these categories that you see up there. I mean, technically, all verbs, all of them have an imperfecto form and a preterito form. But what are you most likely to hear people saying and to need to use yourself? These verbs of ser, estar, tener, haber, they're going to pop up a ton in imperfecto, just know, because all of these actions are more likely to be describing something than saying event, event, event. Yeah. When I talk about events, dar, that's an event. I gave something. How long can you possibly drag that out? Not long. Yeah, right? Decir, you know, unless you're saying, oh, my parents used to tell me, my grandpa always used to say, unless it's that, what do you usually use? How do you generally say told or said? You say it as an event. Oh, this happened. It came out of his mouth. Boom, it's done. So some actions are going to be more frequently heard in that preterito camp. Some verbs are going to be way more likely to fall into this camp of imperfecto, which is good for you because it's easier to form, right? Less oddball things, fewer oddball things. Okay. Fewer irregulars. I should use the right terminology. Fewer irregulars. Okay. Bien. Let's take a quick walkthrough. I hope a quick walkthrough. I don't think we need to do a walkthrough of Anna's story. Am I right? The whole thing of, yeah. You'll notice she used the verb pegar.
Yeah.
Pegar. ¿Qué es pegar? ¿Qué quiere decir pegar en inglés?
Smack or hit or
Smack,
struck.
hit, yeah. Pegar, para que sepan, just so you guys know, para que sepan, pegar can also mean, oddly enough, to glue something, to like attach, adhere something, you know, something stuck to something else, can use the verb pegar. But pegar is very commonly used to say, you know, somebody got smacked upside the head, right? Somebody got hit, you know. Oh, those kids, they were hitting each other, you know. Pegaron, okay, se pegaron, they hit each other. So I don't think you need a whole lot of explanation on the video. Am I right, or correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah,
See, that was
Yeah.
kind of, es obvio, ¿no? Right?
Mhm.
Okay, bien. Pero, esto. This one here, where we've got our two sisters talking about an event, and it disappeared my Zoom screen. So if you have a question, shout it out. Don't try to raise your hand. I won't see your hand. We're going to do a little quick walkthrough. And I'm going to leave the captions on. And y Valentina, usted. Notice she's already calling her usted, even though it's her little baby sister. Okay.
Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? En el video
And let's kind of cut to the chase.
van a escucharnos hablar y van a tratar de entender. Y luego van a ver las preguntas. Entonces, ¿qué vamos a hacer hoy, Valen?
Vamos a recordar las historias de cuando nosotras dos éramos niñas.
Of when we were
Little girls.
little girls. Éramos niñas. Cuando éramos niñas. You're never going to hear somebody say, when I was young or when grandpa was old, using anything other than a form of era. Always, okay? When we were little girls, when we used to be kids.
Vamos a contarles historias de nuestra infancia, ¿no? Entonces, yo voy a contarles...
And when they use infancia, they don't mean infancy in your diapers. Yeah, infancia might show up as infancia, juventud, youth, niñez. Niñez comes from niño. Niñez means childhood also. Okay.
Dos historias pequeñas de Valentina. ¿Y usted cuántas va a contar?
2.
Tenemos muchas, ¿no? Pero hemos escogido las más importantes. Entonces, bueno, Valentina, empiece con la anécdota número 1.
Bueno, cuando Andrea tenía 13 años,
And notice when Andrea was 13, whenever we talk about age, whether you use era joven or tenía 13 años, when we talk about age in the past, it's got to be an imperfect. When we talk about age, not when we talk about having a birthday. I had my birthday on the blah, blah of this month. No, but when we talk about age in the past, it's got to be imperfecto.
yo tenía 7. Entonces, un día Andrea quería hacer una comida especial.
She wanted to make a special dinner. Quería hacer. Okay. And when you express that you wanted to do something, very literally, like 85% of the time, because it's never 100%, there's always some weird exception, but 85% of the time, you're going to hear wanted, whether you wanted a thing or wanted to do something, a thing, it's going to be imperfecto. Because our feelings, our internal emotions, our mental state, our emotional state, it's not an event. In most cases, it's something without a sharp defined beginning and end. Okay, so it's going to be imperfecto.
Para nuestra familia. Entonces, ella cocinó plátanos.
Now we do have something that moves the action forward. Here's the first thing she did. Ella cocinó plátanos. She cooked
Bananas.
plátanos, bananas, but probably a plantain type thing.
Y por encima le echó jarabe.
Le echó jarabe. Now, take out the word jarabe. Echar es como echar. Esto es echar. Boom. Echar. It means to throw, literally. But when we use echar to talk about food, it means you toss something on top of or into. You added an ingredient. That's echar. But notice because these move the story forward, right? She cooked this dish and she added in this ingredient. We put those into preterito. Cocinó plátanos, echó jarabe.
Le echó un medicamento, le echó queso y le echó mermelada. Y ella pensó que, no sé, que era algo rico y que nos iba a gustar, pero estaba muy
Oh, she thought that we were going to like it. She thought this was going to be really yummy. ¿Qué es jarabe? Did you understand what they meant with jarabe? ¿Alguien? ¿Qué es jarabe?
No, I don't. It's some sort of medicine or something.
Jarabe is a syrup, literally.
Oh.
So, para la tos, la
Oh.
tos, un jarabe.
Oh, no.
Ah, no.
Cough medicine.
Jarabe can mean a syrup of some kind, and in this case, they mean jarabe, a cough syrup.
Oh.
One of those dumb things that a kid does because
horrible y nadie se lo comió.
nadie se le comió. Nobody ate it. And of course, yeah, there's the end event. Nobody ate it.
Sí, es que yo quería hacer algo especial para la familia.
Yeah, I wanted to make something for this special for my
Así
family.
que fui a la cocina y
Oh, here's an event. I went to the kitchen. What she means to say is not I was going to the kitchen. It's I went to the kitchen. Fui a la cocina.
como dice Valentina, tomé los plátanos
Oh, I grabbed the plátanos.
y encima puse queso, pero el queso estaba
Oh, on top, I put queso, some cheese. Well, these plantains are a little bit, they cook them, you use them differently than we use them.
rico, ¿no?
El queso estaba rico. The cheese tasted delicious, didn't it?
No, a nadie le gustó.
And now notice something. We'll talk about this later. Nobody liked it. They're not talking about what I used to like when I was a kid. They're talking about the reaction of those people once they got it in their mouths. A nadie le gustó. Nobody liked it. And again, it's an event because it's the reaction people had. Blech. The blech reaction is preterito because boom, it hits right away. A nadie le gustó. Nobody liked it.
Yo puse, Valentina dijo jarabe.
I put on jarabe, yeah.
Jarabe es un medicamento. ¿Cómo describimos un jarabe?
Jarabe es un medicamento que se toma, es líquido. Entonces, cuando
It's liquid. Oh, it's a medicine and it's liquid.
una persona está enferma, puede tomar un jarabe y eso le va a ayudar a que esté bien. Andrea vio que era de color blanco y que era espeso, entonces pensó que era algo rico, pero no, era
Sí,
jarabe.
yo
So, maybe it wasn't labeled, but anyway, she thought it was some kind of a syrup and it was not.
me confundí porque el jarabe es
It was syrup. It was cough syrup.
espeso y
Me confundí. I got confused.
a veces es blanco o rojo. Entonces yo pensé que era una crema.
Oh, I thought it was some kind of a creamy thing.
Por eso la puse encima del plátano. Pero
And puse is the preterito for poner. The N from poner, the N, la N de poner desaparece. The N disappears. And instead of P-O-N, you get P-U-S for the base form of the very, very irregular poner in preterito. La puse encima, I put it on top of the plantains.
era horrible y a nadie le gustó.
It was awful. Just a description. It was awful. Era horrible. Y nadie le gustó. Nobody liked it. So here we're talking about the reaction.
Bueno, ahora yo voy a decirles la anécdota número 2 y después Laura les va a decir la número 3, ¿sí? Ella se llama Laura Valentina, por eso le digo Laura o Valen. Entonces la anécdota número 3 es que yo siempre tenía que bañar a esta señorita.
I always used to have to
Bathe.
bathe, give her a bath, give this little lady a bath.
Todas las mañanas, cuando ella estaba en el jardín,
Oh, when she was in the
Garden.
Garden.
jardín. Yeah. And jardín is used not just for garden, but for yard.
Mm.
Okay. El jardín. So where we would use yard, they will often use jardín. Okay. When she was outside in their little play area near their house, el jardín. Okay. Even if it doesn't have flowers, jardín is your yard where you could grow flowers if you wanted to. But notice she was in the jardín. You're not going to hear estar used in preterito very much to say somebody was in a place. Because when I tell you somebody was in a place, I am painting the picture, the background picture. So in your mind's eye, you're picturing little figures in a yard. It's a description. Okay. Bien.
¿cuántos años tenía usted?
How old were you? Imperfecto, age. We talked in the past about age with imperfecto.
Como 4.
I was like 4. Oh, I was like 4.
Ella tenía 4 o 5 años y en ese tiempo, durante 2 años, yo me levantaba, la bañaba, la cambiaba.
Oh, she talked about all the things she did because she had to, as a big sister, be the caretaker. Me levantaba. I would get up. I would give her a bath. I would change her into her clothing.
Le daba el desayuno.
Oh, I would give her breakfast.
Me
But
después-
again, it's a repeated thing. She uses imperfecto because she wants to see that, oh, I did this every day to take care of Valentina.
¿Qué hacía?
Me llevaba al jardín.
La llevaba al jardín.
La llevaba al jardín. I took her out. Llevar means to take somebody to a place, whether you walk them there or drive them there. When you take a person from one location to another, we use llevar. So llevaba, I would take her to the yard.
Y ella se quedaba allá
Y se quedaba allá, and she would stay there.
con más niños. Y luego en la tarde yo iba a recogerla.
And I would go to pick her up. I used to go. So this is all what she did day after day after day after day for a pretty long period of time.
¿A qué horas más o menos?
Como a las 3.
Entonces yo era como la niñera de ella.
I was like the babysitter. La niñera es babysitter. ERA or ERO tagged onto the end means a person who does that job. So the person who takes care of the kids, whether they're an au pair or a nanny or a babysitter, they're the niñera or the niñero.
Por eso es que ella va a cuidar a mis bebés. ¿Cierto?
Sí.
No, pero ella tiene que pagarme que yo fui la niñera durante 2 años. Entonces, esa es la anécdota número 2. Yo fui la niñera de mi hermana por casi 2 años. Y en la tarde la recogía y la regresaba a la casa. Vamos ahora para la número 3. ¿Cuál es la anécdota número 3?
Cuando estábamos más pequeñas,
Oh, when we were littler, más pequeñas, smaller. Yeah. Again, they're talking about age, even though we don't have a number in there. When we were little kids.
yo y Andrea poníamos música en el equipo de sonido.
We used to put music on, whatever, we don't really know if it was a CD or a tape, but a music player of some kind.
Y cogíamos cepillos para
Cepillos, and they're talking about cepillos, hairbrushes here, cepilla. So cogíamos, we would do this. But again, she's talking about what they used to do many, many times. This was like a play routine that they had. So imperfecto, because what they used to do a bunch of times.
arreglarse el cabello y nosotras empezábamos a cantar, pero teníamos una ventana muy grande Entonces cuando las personas pasaban por fuera de la casa y volteaban
Oh, and she said, well, okay. And we had a big window, and when people would pass by, and then they would turn around to look at us because they'd hear the music.
a mirar, nosotras, nosotras nos escondíamos detrás del mueble para
And we used to hide behind the furniture when we saw people were looking at us.
que no nos vieran.
Sí, es que yo tenía 13 años y
When I was 13, when we talk about age in the past, it's imperfecto.
ella tenía 6 años, ¿no? Y imaginábamos que estábamos en un concierto
We used to imagine that we were in a concert.
y tomábamos los cepillos del pelo, imaginando que eran micrófonos.
So we use the brushes like microphones. Yeah, it's kids play acting.
Y cantábamos, ¿no? Y
And we used to sing, yeah?
gritábamos
We'd
y
yell.
después salíamos corriendo y nos reíamos y era muy, muy, muy chévere.
Okay, and that was really cool. Chévere just means cool. So we would leave, we would go out and run around and laugh. And so again, because they did this a bunch of times, it was play acting. She uses mostly imperfecto with that.
Y bueno, vamos ahora para la anécdota número 4. La anécdota número 4 es que Valentina un día se cayó.
But now she started with se cayó. Perdón, con un día. Un día se cayó. One day she fell down. So now when she talks about one day, it's not, we would always put on the music and pretend like we were singing into microphones and we used our hairbrushes for fake microphones. No, she's talking about what happened one day. Un día se cayó. One day she fell down on the stairs.
Por unas escaleras. ¿Recuerda eso? Ella se cayó. Era muy pequeña.
But now, not an event. The fact that she was little is not an event. It's a description.
Tenía como 5 años.
She was like
Y se
5.
pegó aquí.
Se pegó. We got pegar again. Se pegó. She hit herself right here. Se pegó. She hit herself. Yeah.
Lo siento. Pero era muy chistoso porque
It was really funny. It was really funny. And now she's describing. Era muy chistoso. It was funny.
después ella tenía un chichón aquí. ¿Qué es un chichón?
Es como cuando una persona se golpea, más que todo en la cabeza, entonces como que la piel se pone, o sea, es como si fuera una protuberancia, como un círculo de piel.
So chichón is a great big
Lump.
yeah, big lump. A big lump, essentially, yeah. A knot, a lump. Okay.
Swelling?
Yeah, so yeah, something that happens when you know, it swells up
Sí, como una pequeña pelota.
like a little ball.
Ahí. Y Valentina tenía una aquí, en toda la frente, por muchos.
En toda la frente. En frente doesn't mean just front. En la frente es esta parte aquí, la frente. La frente is forehead. La frente means the forehead.
Por mucho tiempo le duró esta bola ahí, entonces era un poco chistoso. Bueno, y ya para terminar, después de estas 4 anécdotas,
Okay, so we're going to leave that there. Hopefully that helps you to understand any little bit that you might have missed. ¿Sí? Eso es. A ver. Bueno, y let's see if you guys can tell some little stories. Let's share some little stories, and let's share them in big group rather than in little groups. And it can be something very simple. It doesn't have to be from your youth. It could be, I would like it to be something that uses, maybe a little more of the imperfecto, right? That was the way that we kind of envisioned that. But you can switch between, see, you can't really avoid switching between preterito and imperfecto, right? Sometimes you just have to be able to mix them both. But I'd like some people to give maybe an example, and it doesn't have to be a great big, huge event, just anything that happened. Bien? Who's going to be brave? Sí, ¿quién va a ser valiente? Who's going to be brave?
Well,
Bien? Elizabeth,
yes.
¿quieres? Magnífico.
Cuando era joven, nuestra ciudad tenía un parque de atracciones muy grande. Había muchos paseos y mi hermana me llevó allí para mi cumpleaños.
Bien.
Había mucha gente y caminamos por el parque mirando las atracciones. Algunos estaban miedo. Ella tenía suficiente dinero para 6 paseos y mi hermana no recuerdo esta tarde, pero me le encantó.
Me encantó. Me
No,
encantó.
me encantó.
Me encantó. I loved it.
Mhm.
Now, me encantó is great because it was a specific day, right?
Mhm.
It was a specific day. And if you walked out of a place where you did a bunch of rides,
Mhm.
yeah, as a little kid, had a lot of fun, you walk away from that and in your mind you say, wow, I loved it.
Mhm.
I loved it. And it's your reaction, right? Okay, now I want you to notice because this is related to the idea of gustar. I'm really glad that you did this example. Es buen ejemplo. Me encantó, I loved it. Me encantó is how she reacted to this very fun day. But if she were talking about a different event, like let's say that you waited for the ice cream truck with their little musical thing to come around. And, this happened like a bunch of times during the summer, once a week, 3 times a week. Yeah, little ice cream truck would come around. If you're really young, you'd be like, what is that? Yes, people used to actually drive and it would be like getting a taco truck, right? Except it sold ice cream and they would play little music and drive through your neighborhood. And you'd hear that music and you knew that was ice cream coming down your street and you'd run out with your money to go buy it. So if she were talking about, I loved ice cream from that truck, it wouldn't be a one-time thing. If I walked away from the fair, it would be, me encantaba el helado, me encantaba oír la música del camión, me encantaba comprar un helado del camión. I loved buying an ice cream off that truck. Okay? And then you're talking about what you used to do. So it would have to be imperfecto. But see, if your reaction was, oh, we walked away from that day at the fair and I loved those rides. It's just, me encantó. I loved the experience. Excelente. Muy bien. Okay. Alguien más? Somebody else? ¿Quién? Karen, ¿quieres continuar?
Okay. El jueves pasado fui al jardín botánico del desierto. Había muchos pájaros cantando y buscando parejas. Algunos estaban construyendo un nido en una escultura de un cactus.
Nido, a nest. Birds building a nest. Okay.
Había un búho secando la cabeza de un hoyo en un saguaro. So he was sticking his little head out of the hole in a saguaro.
Yeah. Hoyo is a hole. You know how they bore those little holes in the saguaro and then they burrow in and yeah. Okay.
Eso era I'll go especial para ver.
Ah, bien. It was special to see. Okay. And we'll talk about was, should it be fue or should it be era, a different day. Don't sweat
Well,
over it now.
I thought about that, and it's not that uncommon this time of year. So it's not like it was a one-time thing.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
me.
So a brief break, just so that you know, para que sepan, so you know. This is the one thing that could cause some confusion. Well, and I would say it causes confusion for a lot of people. Pero a person will send a signal, a mental signal, or create kind of a mental little flag of what their intent is by using ser in preterito or ser in imperfecto. So you have to just take it as a signal that the speaker uses one tense or the other to convey an impression, to create an impression in your mind. Ser in the past, in el pasado, can be that whole family of era verbs, era, eras, era, éramos, eran. Ser can also be it because it shares with ir this same form. I cannot tell you why it does, but it does. Ir uses these fui family groups of words here. Okay, so do I use era or do I use fue? I'm looking at this bottom tier, like it was. If I want to say it was, do I use era or do I use fue? If somebody chooses to speak to you using era, it was, they're describing it. Era chistoso. You heard the girl saying, oh, era chistoso. It was funny. Okay. If they choose to use era, it's more of a description. If they choose to say fue, por ejemplo, if you're describing a party and somebody says, fue una fiesta muy divertida. Fue una fiesta muy divertida. They are choosing to use fue because it's kind of like you're being kind of disembodied. You're stepping out of the situation and just saying, oh, I remember back that was a fun party. It was a fun party and it's over with. So they're kind of putting an exclamation point or a period or an ending on the description of that party if they use fue. But it's a longer continuous description if they use era. And you don't really need to stress over one or the other. Just know that somebody may use one form of ser in the past versus another, and they're kind of conveying moment in time. Here's how you reacted, or, ooh, this is what it was like. And I'm in the middle of the action telling you how it was. Okay. But don't worry about, will I make a mistake if I say era or fue? Don't sweat that. Bien. Okay. Gracias. ¿Qué más? What else? Más ejemplos. Susana, dime.
Cuando tenía 16 años, trabajaba a la piscina pública en el verano. Sorry. Los veranos en Nueva York eran calurosos.
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 Sí.
Y húmedos. Había mucha gente.
There were a lot of people. Yeah. People are not events. We can't say hubo. It's había. Sí.
Ese trabajo era divertido y hice muchos amigos nuevos.
I made lots of friends. It was fun because you're kind of thinking back, you're putting yourself in the middle of the action. Era divertido, it was fun. Hice muchos amigos, I made friends. That's more, I made friends is kind of did that, done, more preterito, right? You know, if you said hacía muchos amigos, I used to make many friends, they would think that's what you meant. You know, you still would get the idea across. They would still know what you're talking about. Okay, bien.
May I just ask, I had a hard time when I was trying to figure out saying that the summers were hot, because I wanted to get hace calor in there somehow. But I didn't know if there was a way to do that in the past.
Hacía calor. If you're describing that the summers were hot, that is the quintessential description.
Okay.
Boom, end of story.
Hacía
Description,
calor.
right? Let me give you an example. Hacer calor, hacer calor. Okay, let's take a quick look. Esto es para ilustrar. This is to illustrate. See? Hacía calor. Hacía calor. It was hot. It used to be hot in the summer. That's how somebody will interpret that little short phrase. Hacía calor. It used to be hot or it was hot. Okay. But if somebody switched over and they could, and they said, hizo calor, what they're really saying is this. This is what they're really saying. Es posible decir, hizo calor. And what you're saying is, wow, it heated up that day. And you're talking about one day and what happened. Okay. It's like the example of, you could say, en la primavera, let's still stay in the vein of weather. En la primavera, llovía mucho. In spring, it rained a lot. You know, you're talking about the general description of what a typical spring would be in some place that is not here. One of the hardest things I ever had to do was when I taught high school was to teach weather here, because the weather is almost always the same. And it's very hard to convey that idea. You know, this is a cultural thing. Yeah, okay. But, pero, how does that change the meaning if I say something like, llovió, it rained. And now we're talking about like at a time, right? It rained, a specific time. Llovió, or they may express it as empezó a llover. Empezó a llover. It began to rain. If we're talking about it began, an event that's moving the action of what you're saying forward. It's moving your story, mini story forward. It started to rain. Well, it started happens like that. So, empezó a llover, or llovía, it rained. Eso es. That's the difference between using llovía, it was raining, or it used to rain, and empezó a llover, we're talking about the beginning of that event that was a rain event. Pretérito, okay? Empezó a llover is talking about something happened like on a timeline. Boom, it happened right here. But llovía mucho, it used to rain a lot, is describing what it used to be like or what it was like. Okay, entienden? Understand the difference? See?
Thank you.
So people will signal, they'll use one tense or the other to paint a picture in your head. and the picture they're painting is essentially imperfecto, they're giving you a video. They're giving you all the sounds and sights and feelings with imperfecto, or they're going to use preterito to say, boom, snapshot, happened, done. Bien? ¿Sí? Okay. Vale. Otra persona. Somebody else got a contribution, ¿sí? Alguien quiere contribuir algo. Juanita, dinos.
Okay. Había muchas noticias sobre the Mercury 7 cuando yo era una niña.
Ah.
Yo quería ser un astronauta.
Astronauta. Astronauta.
Me encantaban las estrellas por la noche y la ciencia ficción.
Ciencia ficción. And you used me encantaban. Exactly right. Me encantaban las estrellas. I loved the stars. I loved the stuff. And she's not talking about a one-time event. You're talking, Juanita's talking about what she used to really have a passion for as a little kid. See? Bien?
And it's encantaban because las estrellas. So it's
Encantaban because it's estrellas. Me encantaban las estrellas. I loved the stars. I loved the stars, more than one star, because there are all those stars up in the heavens. Now, if Juanita had been talking about seeing the rocket launch, okay, I'm going to give you the difference. Me encantaban las estrellas is exactly right. I loved the stars. But if she were talking about, wow, I watched it launch, man, I loved it, then it would be me encantó. Me encantó. Because it would be the reaction of, okay, you see this thing take off and this thing explodes and you're going to go, wow, right? And it happens like that. Me encantó. I loved it. But that means you're walking away. You turned off the TV. You walk away. Wow, I loved that. And that's your gut reaction right away, right? But that's not what she was describing. She was describing what oh man, I loved the stars when I was a kid. So encantaban, me encantaban las estrellas. Perfecto. Bien.
Excuse me, Marilyn. So is that the same when you're saying I realize something? Because when you realize it's like a, it's
How
an
fast
event.
does I realized happen?
Yeah.
What,
The light
what
bulb.
happens in your brain? Yeah, the light bulb goes off.
Right,
That
right.
whole cartoon thing of the light bulb goes off. That is preterit. That's preterit. Uy, me di cuenta. Me di cuenta de algo. I realized something. If what you mean is, man, it hit me. Preterito. Boom. You went to see Dune. Dune in the theater. No, I went to see Dune. Was it HBO or Amazon? It was HBO, was it not? Yeah, HBO. We saw Dune. Wow. Okay. Ay, me encantó Dune. Wow, I loved Dune. But now I'm talking about my reaction. You know, the fact that I walked away from Dune when it faded out. Oh, me encantó. Wow, I loved it. It was like, boom, all of a sudden. Wow. Yeah. Okay. But that's not the same as saying, me encantaba ir al cine con mis amigos cuando era joven. I loved going to the movies with my friends when I was young. That's a different experience. Now you're talking about something I did over and over and over. Because, you know, you're 13, 14, 15, 16 and up and you go, what do you do? Well, you go to the movies with your friends. That's one of the things you might do. Okay. And over again. So imperfecto. Entienden? Understand? Is this helping set up the situations a little bit better? Un poquito más?
Sí.
It takes a long time It is a very, if you feel like, ooh, this is not natural, it is not natural for us. We do it, but we are unconscious of the structures we use to do it in English. And this is why it's hard for us to get the difference in Spanish. You need to hear tons of examples. Más ejemplos, more examples. Alguien, somebody else. And if you haven't got it perfect, well, welcome to the club, because we can't be all perfect all the time. Okay, Kathy. Yeah.
Cuando yo estaba joven, mi esposo futuro y yo íbamos a su nuestra pizzería favorita todos los viernes. Nosotros íbamos allí porque la pizza estaba muy deliciosa y una cena de pizza y 2 Coca-Colas costaba solo $5.
Oh, costaba, sí, costaba. Sí. Oh, $5. Ya no, not anymore. Ya no, $5. Ay, a ver, okay. Only a little correction I'm going to give you. Cuando éramos jóvenes, when we were young. We cannot use estar. I think you had estar with joven. Am I right? We have to use ser with joven, and therefore it will plug ser into that imperfecto mode. Cuando éramos jóvenes, when we were young.
I
¿Sí?
have more to the story if you want to hear it.
Oh, sí, sí, claro.
Una noche a las 3 de la mañana,
Whoa!
un fuego destruyó el restaurante.
Ooh!
Burned down by the mafia.
Oh!
No.
Wow!
And so they didn't rebuild it because they knew it would get burned down again.
Okay. Preterito. Well, that is preterito if ever you had it, right? Yeah.
Yes, it
But
was
now,
great.
let me show you a quick thing. If I wanted to say there was a fire, is this not what you would say in English? There was a fire? In that situation, I could not say había un fuego.
Did you say fue un fuego?
No, hubo un fuego.
Hubo.
This is one of the rare situations where you'll hear the preterito for haber. Hubo. In chat box, I'll type out hubo in the chat box. And hubo only goes into that one form. It's never. What would you even do that? Well, hubieron, but no, you wouldn't. Hubo, there was, there were. With fuego, it would be perfectly natural and really the only correct thing to say, because a fire is, boom, an event. Yeah.
I still have more to the story.
Okay. Oh, okay. Continúa.
Después de nuestra boda, mi esposo y yo continuábamos comiendo pizza todos los viernes durante más de 40 años. Hasta que nos cansamos de la pizza. After we got tired of pizza after 40 years.
Okay. Sí.
Nunca encontrábamos una pizza tan deliciosa.
Bien. Okay. Bueno.
We never found such a good pizza.
Nunca encontrábamos, nunca encontrábamos mejor pizza, algo mejor que esa pizza. Okay, bien, excelente. But now you see when hubo will happen. Here's another thing where hubo might happen. Por ejemplo, estamos en un parque o no importa tanto. Estamos en un salón en un salón muy grande, en el salón de un hotel, ¿sí? Por ejemplo, fuimos a un salón de un hotel un día y hubo una boda. There was a wedding because the wedding was being held. It was an event. Hubo una boda. There was a wedding. A wedding is an event. Hubo una boda. Oh, por ejemplo, qué desastre. Ayer hubo un accidente enfrente del supermercado. Hubo un accidente de carros enfrente del supermercado. Okay. There was an accident in front of the supermarket, but an accident happens. Okay, una boda doesn't, not over that fast, we hope, or otherwise you're not having a whole lot of fun. But again, an event. Hubo is sometimes used to talk about, there was a party or there was a meeting, because meetings, they're events. But if I say there were people, the people are not events. It's got to be había. Bien? ¿Sí? Había. If I say había mucha gente, I want you to picture in your mind many little figures standing close together, right? In this space. Okay, so those little people standing around, they're not an event, right? But, a wedding reception, that's an event. Or a wedding ceremony, that's an event. See? Bien? Okay.
But are you dead wrong if you use fue? I mean, because there was a wedding or there was a fire.
But you're saying there was. There was is one thing. It is another.
Okay. So what you're
por
actually
ejemplo,
saying when you say
por
fue
ejemplo,
is it was.
Es un periódico de mi pueblo muy pequeño. Es un periódico de mi pueblo, ¿no? It's. I'm telling you what it is. But I could say, había periódicos en la oficina del doctor. Wow, there were newspapers in the doctor's office. There were. But now I mean there were.
Okay, so when you're using fue, it's more of a it was as opposed to a.
You're identifying something or maybe describing it, right?
Okay.
You're putting a label on it, saying what this thing or person was, or you could be describing, you could be saying something was fun. You could. Es posible. And it could be possible to use either fue or era to describe something that was fun. It would kind of depend on the point of view of the person who's telling the story. And there, either one may be okay. But there's not a lot of leeway between using es and I, between using había and era. Había is there was or there were. Había pájaros en los árboles. There were birds in the trees. Yeah. You would not say eran, I have to think about that. Eran pájaros en los árboles, because it wouldn't mean there were anymore. It would mean, yeah. To say there were, it's got to be había. Boom. Eso es. Okay. Bien. Okay. Kathleen, ¿tienes algo?
Sí. Ok, cuando eran una niña, mi familia visitó Canadá cada verano. Mis padres nacieron en Canadá y todos mis tíos, tías y primos vivían en Canadá. Nos quedaríamos
con mi tía y mi tío a sus cabanas en el río Atua. Mi y mis primos nos quedamos despiertos hasta tarde. Nosotros estábamos jugando juegos de mesa y estábamos mirando las estrellas. Fue muy divertido.
Okay, bien. And if what you mean is kind of standing from the outside looking in, oh, wow, that was a night, that was a fun thing, you can easily say, fue muy divertido. It was really fun. Bien, right? People may say era divertido if they're kind of thinking in the moment. They may say fue divertido. I'm standing outside. Oh, it was long ago. And wow, that was fun, because they're putting an end on it, right? That those days are over. And that is fine. Bien. Perfecto. And I want you to notice one thing. Mis parientes vivían en el Canadá. My relatives lived in Canada. Even if they're gone, even if they're long since passed away, when what you mean is they used to live there, it's got to be vivían. Vivían. If you're describing they used to live there, what you mean is used to live there, vivían. And we wouldn't say vivieron, they lived. We wouldn't say vivieron unless we pegged it with a beginning and an end. So if I wanted to say my parents lived near Ottawa, or my parents lived, like to make it easier, my parents lived in Ottawa from 1975 to 1978. Now I'm putting a beginning and an end. And you can and should use pretérito. Mis padres vivieron en Ottawa desde 1975 hasta until, now I'm giving my endpoint, 1978. But now, because you're pegging specific years and an endpoint, it would be vivieron. But if you're just talking in general, my parents used to live there, it's just vivían. Or my relatives lived there. Mis parientes vivían allá. My relatives lived there. It's very
So
open-ended.
I said Vivian, I think.
You did say
Yes, too.
vivían.
But, and then when I said my parents were born, nacieron is, because that's preterito, right?
Yes. Okay. Bien. Okay. Here's another good thing, really worth pointing out. In the big scheme of things, certain kinds of verbs will lend themselves more to preterite or more to imperfecto. Vivían, vivía, vivías, vivía. Yeah, anything in that family, right? Anything in that family of vivir is when we're just saying used to live, and we're not defining it to a specific period of time, just used to live, right? And vivir will very, very often be in this mode when you're describing something. But think about this verb nacer. Nacer means, and we need 3 words in English to say this idea, to be born. And you'll notice in nacer, there is no be. It's just nacer. Okay. Unlike used to live, how often do you say somebody was being born? Not that much. Not that much. So this one tends to be preterito. It just tends to be because of the nature of what that means, right? It's going to be nací, I was born, or naciste, you were born, or nació. The only way you're going to hear nacer in imperfecto is if you read something in a novel and, well, while the baby was being was being born. There was great commotion in the house, and they're describing the scene. And how often in talking do we know? You read about that, but we don't talk using that. You say, oh, when were you born? I was born. She was born. My parents were born. My grandparents were born. And we mean, boom, that's it, and done. So nacer, although the conjugations exist in imperfecto, you'll hardly ever hear it conversationally used in imperfecto because it's not very useful in imperfecto. Was born, but lived, used to live is super useful. And we say used to live all the time. Bien. Vale. Más, more.
I have one.
Okay, bien.
Okay.
Patricia.
Cuando era joven, visitaba a la casa de mi abuela. Había una heladería que estaba 2 cuadros de su casa. Si hacía calor, caminábamos allí y mi abuela me compraba un gran cono de helado. Yo disfrutaba comerlo mientras caminábamos juntos a su casa.
Ok, bien, fantástico. Un hábito, a habit, a thing that happens a lot. Exactamente, exactamente. Ok, fantástico. Fantástico. ¿Qué más? What else? Bien, Susana, sí, dinos.
Hace muchos años, mi esposo y yo navegábamos nuestro pequeño velero en el lago Michigan. Algunos días, cuando los vientos eran muy fuertes, comimos a través del agua. Otros días, cuando había poco o ningún viento, nos sentábamos en el velero y esperábamos para el viento iniciar la vega.
Ok, bien. Velero es un barco con una tela, ¿sí? Con una tela, ¿sí? Y el viento con un velero.
Sailboat.
Exacto. Muy bien, sí, muy bien. Now, one thing I want to show you, this is the hard thing to pronounce with the imperfecto, is the nosotros form. Okay? The nosotros form is a tough one to pronounce because it is so dang long. And there's just no other yet because. And especially the habamos ones. So if you want to say that you were navigating, you were cruising along, navegar is to navigate, but you know, when people talk about sailing, cruising along, they'll use navegar. Even if you're cruising along on a skateboard, they'll use navegar because, you know, it's smooth going. Navegar, right? You can use it for anything from un kayak to, you know, un barco, un velero, anything like that. But when we already start to have a long verb, right? This becomes really hard to say. So here's what I want you to do when you get a nosotros form. Think of it as habamos. Navegábamos. Bien. Okay. Otro ejemplo. Trabajar. Wow. Again, really long word. Trabajar, right? But trabajábamos. Even hablar. If what you mean to convey is we were talking when something else interrupted us, right? Ooh, hablábamos, hablábamos. So keeping that a nice, smooth thing with pronunciation is difficult to do when you're starting out because the word is so long. Navegábamos, trabajábamos, hablábamos, but think of it as habamos, habamos, habamos. You're used to having amos, amos, but it's habamos. And the reason this carries an accent mark is because we are punching, giving more stress to a syllable that is unnatural. It is unnatural. When a word ends in a letter S, we expect that the punch is going to be here, but that's not the way we pronounce that verb form. And to signal to somebody that we're punching a different syllable that you don't expect, we've got to write that in as an accent mark when it's written. So it's pronounced hablábamos, trabajábamos. And that is the one form that is very, very difficult to pronounce because of how long it winds up being. Bien? Vale? So that's something to work about, but listen for it when people talk and use it. Okay, ¿qué más? Anybody else? ¿Alguien más? Jane, dinos.
I have a question about giving birth. Isn't there an idiom, the dar la luz, that takes care of some of that?
Oh, sí, there is an idiom. To be born is nacer. To give birth, the phrase they use is in fact an idiom because it cannot be translated exactly or it doesn't make any sense. Dar a luz, dar a luz. Give to light. It's very poetic. The Italians use it as well. Dar a luz means to give birth, but not to be born. Dar a luz is what the mama does.
Okay.
Papa, so sorry, your job was long before, but mom's job is dar a luz, right? Dio a luz a su nuevo bebé. She gave birth to her new baby. And boy, that's an event. You bet. And done. So preterito, you got it. Okay.
Okay. So my story
sí.
is hace 50 años, mi primer trabajo fue en la sala de cirugía. Trabajé en el hospital muy viejo. No había aire acondicionado. Todas las ventanas estaban abiertas. Mi trabajo era pegar moscas.
Pegar moscas. Pum, pum. ¿Sí? Pegar moscas. Pegar moscas is swatting
flies.
Flies. Okay. But now when you're talking about I was working, probably easier to keep it in trabajaba en un hospital. I was working in a hospital. Unless you say un verano, one summer, because sometimes we have a summer job that's just one summer. Yeah. Un verano trabajé en el hospital. One summer I worked at the hospital. Okay. But
that
usually
phrase
it's trabajaba.
That phrase, hace 50 años, doesn't indicate.
Yeah, hace 50 años, yes, you do need pretérito. Hace 5 años trabajé. Sí, perdón. Sí. Sí, eso es. That is correct. Hace 5 años says 5 years ago, and then you need trabajé, I worked. Or hace 50 años, 50 years ago, trabajé, I worked. Bien. Okay. Gracias. Excelente. ¿Qué más? Any others? Okay. Marlene, dinos.
Cuando era joven, yo vivía en el norte de Wisconsin. Había muchos lagos para nadar, para navegar, para esquiar en el agua allí, pero solo durante el verano. Los lagos estaban congelados durante el invierno.
They were frozen in the winter. See.
I mean, they're
Eso-
frozen all winter long, so that would be an ongoing, okay.
Yeah, and you're describing what they looked like. They were frozen. Yeah. Okay. Bien. Bueno, me gusta muchísimo. Ok. ¿Qué más? ¿Qué más? Nada, nada. Ok. Oh, perdón. Sí, Federico.
Cuando era joven, tenía los caballeros y trabajaba en los ranchos. Entonces tenía una novia que vivía en el pueblo en el norte de Arizona. Didn't know how to say cowgirl. I almost said vaca de niña, but I resisted.
Wait, so what you want to say is a calf?
No, what I said was when I was young,
Yeah.
it wasn't pidgin English. This is supposed to be Spanish. When I was young, I had horses and I worked in ranches. Then I had a girlfriend, I put novia, that lived in the pueblo in northern Arizona. Now, then I moved into another, and I used the word, I started by saying a las 2 horas at 2 o'clock, and I was talking about today. Given that I pegged the time at 2 o'clock, can I get away at that point with preterito?
To talk about the time?
So I said a las dos.
There's something very specific you have to do about time.
Okay.
So now will be the time to talk about that. Okay. Here is something that if you are a person who likes to think very logically, this will not make sense, but it is what it is. To talk about time in the past, you must use imperfecto. And that's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem right. If you wanted to say it was 2 o'clock, well, isn't that a specific time? And then it's done being 2 o'clock. I know, but here's how people will tell time in the past. It'll either be this word with, I got to change one thing here so I get my punctuation right. If it's this time on a watch, anything in the 1 o'clock hour, it'll be that. Okay. And if it's any other hour, it's going to be that. All right, let's see why it is that way. We use ser to tell time. So es la una means it's 1 o'clock. Right? It's 1 o'clock. When we're saying it is 1 o'clock. Es la una, right? Pero son las 3. Son las 6, whatever other time you've got, right? Es la for 1 o'clock hour, and everything else is son las. Okay. When we translate that into the past and you want to say, oh, it was this time. Era la una. It was 1 o'clock. Or eran las 2. Eran las 5:30. 5:30. If you want to say it was a certain time, in Spanish, you must use imperfecto to talk about telling time in the past. Boom. And that's just, it's a rule they have. It doesn't make logical sense, but it's what they use. Bien?
Yes, seems to be you told us that.
But yeah, but it's it doesn't always come up. I mean, you're more likely to talk about other things than it was a certain time, you know, more likely to talk about what you used to do or what you were doing at a specific time, right? Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you used ser, if you used the preterite, you would be using a fuiste, fue, and it would be getting confused with something else. So that's maybe
they just don't use preterite for telling time in the past ever. They just don't. It's always era or eran, always. And it's best to just leave it at that. It's era. Don't look for a reason. It just is that. Bien? Okay. Bueno, hay más. Any other stories? I'm going to give you more past stories to listen to. There'll be, I think there are 2 short ones. And these 2 people are going to talk kind of slowly, I'm going to say. Maybe slower than what I would like. But they will talk a little bit slowly. One is going to talk about what a place used to be like. Actually, I'll have you watch that second. One person is going to talk about like her neighborhood, what her neighborhood was like. And the other person is going to talk about what a city is like. And he's going to show, here's how this city looks right now. Here's how it used to look 50 years ago, 70 years ago, and comparing the 2. So you can hear people flipping between right now and past, right now and the past. Okay. So it'll be 2 kind of interesting stories. One, a much more personal story. One, much more here's how this used to be. What I would like you to do as kind of an exercise is to talk about, describe something about either your hometown. Well, I want to leave it pretty wide open. Wherever it is that you grew up, what it used to be like in that town. Okay. Or if you grew up around here, you know, what Phoenix was like and what it is like now, you know, kind of a contrast. And don't make it super long, you know, talk about 2 things, you know, what this was like and what it is like now. Actually, I should, you know what, I'm going to amend that a little bit. I'll amend your homework a little bit. I want to make it more clear cut. I want you to talk about a couple of things of how it used to be and how it is now, how it used to be and how it is now. I will send you my descriptions. And that way we'll leave it wide open so that you can describe something. You may want to talk about how technology has changed. You may want to talk about like what your phone used to look like when you were a little kid versus what it looks like now. But I can't post something. I'll make it pretty broad so that you can do anything you like with it. Actually, when you watch the video on gentleman describing Barcelona, you'll get the idea. But they are both going to talk fairly slowly, a little bit slower than I would like you to have it, but they're good past description videos to, again, get your brain in working in that gear. And also you have to kind of start to get your brain in gear of thinking that people will switch between talking about the past and now, because we do that all the time. Totally unconscious that we're doing it in English. And therefore, that's exactly what they will do. But you have to kind of be prepared for people flipping between different tenses. So we'll give you a couple of stories to get your feet wet with that. See? Bien? Okay. Here's another thing I want us to do this, or what I want to do next week. I wanted to fit this in this week, but you guys had a lot of good stories. So I didn't want to interrupt the flow. We're also going to do this, but I don't want to send you off to do this one on your own. We're going to look at the word Lo que. Lo que. Eso es lo que quiero. Eso es lo que quiero means that's what I want. And we're going to talk a little bit. I hope to spend some time next week talking about why we use lo que and what it means to use lo que, and we'll plug it into some ideas to use it so that you can actually use it yourself. Okay? ¿Está bien?
Sí.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantástico. Okay. Eso es todo. Great. We will end our recording.